The Florida home series taking place this weekend, in my eyes, opens up a lot of speculation. That being around the idea of who makes it out of a grueling Group A. First off, you have an improving Toronto Ultra, right? Many people thought this was a team that would flop after losing Looney, but they didn't really play bad whatsoever the Dallas home series, considering the fact that they would later take down the champions of the event, the Florida Mutineers, in round one. Granted, Florida never looks great when it comes down to first round games, but regardless, Toronto managed to also take the S&Ds in a hard point versus the Mutineers. They later face off against the Empire, where they managed to force a game five, winning a Dom on Hackney and a hard point on Gunrunner. They later rematch against Florida, and while they did lose that one 3-1, it was still close, right? Considering that the S&D goes to around 11 and Toronto takes a domination off of the Mutineers, which is never an easy task. The reason why I'm highlighting Toronto whatsoever, because many people are going to instantly write this team off. Look at the record, look at the points, and say, all right, you know what? It's going to be all about the other three teams. Toronto isn't as bad as many people think, right? They actually play Call of Duty the right way. My biggest issue with Toronto is that they're not always reliant on a specific game mode, right? Sometimes you can rely on them to be great in search and destroy. Sometimes they can surprise you and take respawns like they did off of Dallas. This is a team that I think is consistently good at most of everything, but not great. And in this league, you have to be great at something or multiple things in order to take down certain rosters. Again, I like this team a majority of the time in search and destroy. And I feel like for them in this group, based on a lot of these teams, they're great at respawns. You need to rely on the search and destroys, and you need to rely on them consistently. This team hasn't showed me that they can be reliant on search and destroy all the time, but I think they have potential to win a few maps here. I think they have the potential to do some work. This is a solid unit. And it's just a matter of all of them clicking at once, which is a lot easier said than done. But I think there is still promise with the Ultra. Also, by them not making a move last event, that tells me that they were actually pretty happy with what they saw and the promise that this event, rather that this team made at the last event. We have seen it, Ultra management, they have made so many moves on the year. The fact that they don't after this event showed me that they actually were pretty happy with the way that they played, right? Toronto has been so heavy on making moves quickly. And I think if management is willing to give this team another try, I think it means that the organization sees the same possibility, the same potential that I see in this unit as well to possibly make some noise. However, it will be a very scary group for them to try and make some noise in. The next team that you'll have to worry about if you are Toronto is going to be a very solid looking subliners. One of the lamest excuses that I heard after the Chicago home series was, well, New York, granted they had some good moments, but they only won one series. Listen, I understand if you think this team is a one event wonder, but considering the fact that they played Chicago not once, but twice, and then later on played off against the Atlanta FaZe, using the excuse that they won one series, I think is ridiculous. Considering that they were labeled by many people as the worst team coming into an event versus what many consider to be the number one and the number two team. For people to say, oh, they just won one series, that's crazy to me, right? That is crazy to think about, because you have to look at what they did. And even if they were to bomb out at this particular tournament, if they were to bomb out at the next one, this still for me is impressive. And you have to look at the details of what they did as well. One of those details was adding in Mac Melts, who looked absolutely fantastic. I mentioned coming into the Chicago home series that I was being told by many people, Landon, this guy is the real deal. Landon, watch out for this guy. This guy has some real potential to be something special. He was playing well in scrims. I kept hearing from Attach in the interviews that I did with him, watch out for Mac. Mac is great, and he is not affected by top caliber teams. Composure is one of his best abilities, and he showed that versus two of the top teams in the world. They faced off against only them, and they looked like a totally different team compared to what we had seen in the season so far. Listen, I understand that Mac's stats didn't blow people's mind, but that's not the point, right? For the role that he plays and for the teams that he faced off against, he opened the door for his teammates to be successful, right? Everyone on New York just looked like the chains had been lifted, right? Zuma finally had somebody to run alongside. Attach was playing excellent. Accuracy was solid. Temp was taking over maps. This team was invigorated by a piece that they desperately needed. They came out and shocked the Chicago Huntsmen, as I expected in a game 5, winning a hard point and winning both of the search and destroys and attacking a team that was weak in certain areas. They go game 5 versus FaZe, winning both hard points convincingly. Listen, people are going to forget this. People are going to forget because they see the 3-2 for FaZe. Okay, that's it. But don't forget that game 4 in which New York manages to rally. They win on St. Petro 250-82 for one of the most convincing victories in the CDL versus arguably the number 1 team at the time. That is impressive, right? Those are details that you miss out on and saying, well, they only won one series. They go game 5 with FaZe after destroying them in both of the hard points. Surely, I get the fact that they lose other maps somewhat dominantly, but only one other team this year has managed to win 2 hard points off of FaZe. And when they did so, they won the series. That team being the Minnesota Rokkr. I understand that Chicago and FaZe both didn't look like themselves, especially Chicago as of recent, but this could be the origin of something special for the subliners. I don't think this is something to laugh at or something to think, it's just one event. I think that this was incredibly impressive, especially considering this was Mac's first ever pro event. The guy's never played professionally, and for him to come out against these 2 top caliber teams to be the piece to change what is arguably the worst team in the league, that's the reason why he was my number 1 player to watch coming into the online league. Let's move forward. Next roster to look at, the Florida Mutineers, right? The Dallas home series defending champions. This roster looked absolutely fantastic the last time we saw them, right? We were mesmerized by how great they looked, by how solid they played. Despite an early round 1 loss at the event, they make an incredibly impressive run, taking down the Gorillas, taking down Toronto, taking down Chicago again, by the way, and later taking down Minnesota. The one thing that I remember most from the Dallas home series was the grand final, right? This was a Rokkr team hot off of beating the Dallas Empire, right? Getting their revenge from the grand finals in LA. Right, Assault was playing great. He was looking like an MVP. Alex was starting to heat up. GodRx looked fantastic as usual, and Silly was stepping up in a major way. This looked like the best version that we had seen of the Minnesota Rokkr this year. A team coming into the grand final that I said, this is their time. This is the Rokkr's chance to claim a title. And after a loss to the Empire in the LA home series, they were hungry and they came back with a vengeance and looked incredible. And to say that this team in particular, the one that we're talking about, the hype around this roster and the percentage of people that thought they were going to win, Florida said no. Florida absolutely shut everyone up. Pharaoh was looking like one of the best players in the world. Frosty was stepping up in a major way. Havoc was hitting new levels. And obviously, we know what to expect from guys like Skies. Mox was playing at his top level as well. This team stepped up in a way that we didn't know was possible. They obliterate the Rokkr when it comes down to especially the last 3 games in a way that few teams have managed to do so versus this roster. This group, if they can be at that same level, tap into that same vein, could be incredibly lethal, especially at their own home series. Finally, the last roster to round out a very scary group is the Minnesota Rokkr, right? This is a team that we just kind of talked about. This is a team that has been so solid all year long. Listen, I don't have to make a case for you for Minnesota. I know that you know yourself. This is a very talented team. This has been a roster that is always resilient. This is a team that I don't have to sell you on. This is a team I don't have to throw statistics your way and try to convince you, oh, this is a good team, I promise. No, it doesn't work with this roster. The results speak for themselves. They are always resilient. They come out to the LA home series, take down a peak form Atlanta FaZe 3-2, winning back-to-back hard points and winning a search and destroy. They force a game 5 with the Dallas Empire after going down 0-2, by the way. They come back at the next event, take down Dallas, and later fall, like we mentioned, to the Mutineers. But this was a team, despite how much credit you can give to Florida, this was a team that looked insane, right? This is a roster that just looked totally out of the water, almost better than anybody else that we had seen on the season. This is a group that's crafty, and once they lose, they always have the fire to come back. They always learn from their mistakes, because every team that has knocked out the Minnesota Rocker from an event has later lost to them in the very next one. Rocker's revenge is a real thing. FaZe beat them in a reverse sweep at the Atlanta home series. Rocker later come back at the next event in LA, beat FaZe 3-2. Empire beat Rocker 3-1 in the finals at the LA home series. Rocker come back the next event in Dallas and beat the Empire 3-1. This is a team that learns how they lost. And that's what makes them so lethal. A group like this, who is so well connected, is a terrifying sight. So who's making it out of this group, right? I mean, you got some very solid teams that stack up extremely well versus each other. Who's falling where? Right? Who are we exactly thinking is going to make it out of this one? So I'm going to go quickly, match by match. I don't want to stay here for too long, but to kind of give exactly where my thought process is when it comes down to the group of death here in Florida. First series, Ultra versus New York. Listen, I like Toronto, right? I talked about them just a few moments ago. I think that they have some real promise. I don't think this series is going to be a beatdown. I think that Toronto has the ability to make certain respawns close. They are at times a very talented search and destroy team, but I just trust what I saw from New York in Chicago. Right? I trust the respawn talent. I like the grittiness of this team, and I think their improvement with Mac is just too much for this to go Toronto's way. Next series, Florida versus Rocker, a grand final rematch from the Dallas home series. And I'll be honest, I'm thinking Minnesota for this one. And I have two reasons why. Number one, Florida at every event they have played at this season have always dropped the first series, right? You can look at every single event, despite what have been some phenomenal placements. Every time they have lost their first series. Minnesota, every time they have lost to a team this year, as we mentioned a minute ago, every time that they have lost to a team at an event, the very next event, they come out and they beat that team. Happened to FaZe, happened to Dallas, and I think it happens again here versus Mutineers. Third series, we have Florida versus Toronto. Of course, this is just based off of my predictions. Like I said, I think Toronto isn't a team to joke about. I think they have a chance to make this one close, but you can't doubt the Mutineers. The way that they have looked, their comeback stories are real. They often, for some reason, just need to refocus after the first series. They like to have their back against the wall, and I think they'll be able to take down Toronto, much like they have previously. And I think they do get through what is a very sneakily talented Toronto roster. Next series, this would be who comes out in the first seed of this group. And I won't be sticking with these for too long. New York versus Minnesota. I'm going for the upset. Right? I'm going to be going for the upset here. Minnesota have never come out in the first seed of their group. Granted, this is arguably their best chance to do it. And I know it's hard to visualize, but I'm going with New York here. I think the SMG presence was telling. I love what we saw from them. Minnesota has never faced off against this new New York team. I think they have the grittiness. I think they have the improvements with Mac, who I think is going to get better as events go on. I think the entire team is kind of motivated and ready to go. Hopefully, they've done their homework on the Rocker, because it is not going to be an easy series. That one is one of the hardest series for me to predict, but I'm going to be going with the upset, much like how I did last event. I feel like I predicted the New York Subliners pretty well, and I'm sticking with it. Fifth and final series of this group would be Florida versus Rocker. Who makes it out in the second seed? This one is hard to call, I'll be honest, as this was a rematch from earlier on in which I predicted Rocker to win this. This one is difficult, but I'm going to say Rocker here. I am, and it's hard because I instantly think about, well, look at the stats from Florida. Look at the fact that they have taken down Minnesota previously, because for me, at least in most recent times that they've played against each other, that would be a 1-1. I have Rocker here based on where I have them in the power rankings right now. I have Rocker above Florida. It is hard to say, and it's hard to look at this team because you have to consider that the best Rocker team in the final from the Dallas home series, the best version that we have seen from them, Florida managed to take them down. But I mentioned that in that particular series, that was the best that we have seen Florida all year long. And I think that will be the best Florida that we see all year long. I like this group, but somebody has to get eliminated. It's going to be hard because this is the Florida home series. But I'm going with the upset. I think I have Rocker here in the second seed, and I've got New York coming out of this one in the first. I like the talent the Rocker have. Calling Florida to lose in groups by no means is easy, but I think they do have some difficult matchups. I think there are teams that are going to start to kind of figure this particular roster out more. Domination is a game that they've relied upon for a very long time. I think if teams can start to kind of figure them out, exploit them, and search to destroy, you have a team like New York who is great at hard point. It's going to be hard, man. It's going to be hard to predict, but I'm feeling New York. I predicted them very well last event, and I think they're only going to improve in online scrimmages. But hey, like I said, you have three teams that I think you could all make a case for. It's just a matter of having to eliminate one of them. I'm going for the upset, though, when it comes down to Florida. I don't think they make it out of this group. I am all in on New York. It kind of hurts me, it kind of scares me to say that, but I'm riding with the young gun of Mac. I think that we see the subliners look great this event, and it's hard to deny a team in the Minnesota Rocker who have been extremely, extremely consistent. Like I said, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how these results pan out. That is the way that I see this group of death working here in A at the Florida Home Series.